Hello everybody, welcome back to our channel. It's John from Ali again. I hope you're having a wonderful week and it's time for another episode of Native Speed Listening. So sit back, relax, and we're gonna cover some very useful day-to-day phrases with some pronunciation and some new idioms. Today's topic is idioms related to the sense of touch. Now, we're going to go in, do a little bit of explanation for the format of this video. If you've already seen our other videos and you can remember the format, feel free to skip forward to the first phrase. Now first, I will introduce phrases with some new idioms related to the sense of touch. After that, once I introduce the phrase, I will go through, I will discuss the pronunciation and the sound changes and the grammar and new terms of these phrases. Let's improve our native speed English together. Let's get started. They say my teacher's old-fashioned, but I think he's just out of touch. They say my teacher is old-fashioned, but I think he's just out of touch. They say my teacher's old-fashioned, but I think he's just out of touch. This phrase was, they say my teacher is old-fashioned, but I think he's just out of touch. Here in this first sentence, teacher is old-fashioned gets reduced to teacher's old-fashioned. And in our second sentence, out of touch turns into out of touch. Now, we have two new phrases that we might not know here. Our first one is old-fashioned. Old-fashioned just means something that is an old style. Maybe it's no longer relevant. But it's not necessarily a negative phrase. Now, for our second term here, out of touch. This is a very negative phrase, meaning that something is not updated with current information and is no longer relevant. Now, let's move on. I have to get going now, but let's keep in touch. I have to get going now, but let's keep in touch. I have to get going now, but let's keep in touch. This phrase was, I have to get going now, but let's keep in touch. Note, in the beginning of this sentence, I have to becomes I have to. There's almost a Y sound there. And towards the end of the sentence, let's keep in touch becomes let's keep in touch. Now, for this second sentence, we're going to look at the phrase keep in touch. This means to maintain contact with another person, be it by message or phone call. Now, let's move on. I don't like being a team leader. I prefer more hands-on work. I don't like being a team leader. I prefer more hands-on work. I don't like being a team leader. I prefer more hands-on work. This phrase was, I don't like being a team leader. I prefer more hands-on work. As for our pronunciation, the T in don't softens, so instead of I don't like, it becomes I don't like. You almost can't hear it. And in being a team leader, being a becomes being a team leader, team leader. Being a team leader. And finally, when we say hands-on, the sounds smooth together and the S becomes more of a Z sound, hands-on. Now, we have a new term here, hands-on. Hands-on means something where you are very closely related to the product that is being produced. For example, if you are a construction worker or a restaurant worker, this is very hands-on work. Hands-on can also mean being very involved in something. For example, a teacher or a manager could be very hands-on and involved in everybody's work. Or we have the opposite term, hands-off, meaning that they're not very closely involved and they give their students or workers a lot of autonomy. That's it for this phrase. Let's move on. I worried about Sally, but she's really starting to get a feel for a new position. I worried about Sally, but she's really starting to get a feel for her new position. I worried about Sally, but she's really starting to get a feel for her new position. Now this phrase was, I worried about Sally, but she's really starting to get a feel for her new position. Notice in this sentence a few pronunciation points. At the beginning, when we say worried about, the D in worry goes to the beginning of about. So instead of worried about, worried about. And the same can be said for she's really. Instead of she's really, it becomes she's really. Now, in this sentence, we have a new term, to get a feel for. To get a feel for something means that you get used to it. You get good at or comfortable with it. That's it for this phrase. Well, let's move on to the next one. He tried to talk to the new girl at work, but she just brushed him off. He tried to talk to the new girl at work, but she just brushed him off. He tried to talk to the new girl at work, but she just brushed him off. Now, this sentence was, he tried to talk to the new girl at work, but she just brushed him off. Notice here in tried to talk to becomes tried to. That O sound gets really reduced here. And after that, talk to the becomes talk to the. So tried to talk to the. Now, we have another new term here. She brushed him off. To brush something off, think of this motion here. This is brushing something off. This means to ignore someone or to not pay attention to them. So clearly she was not interested in this situation. That is it for this sentence. On to the next one. The students this year are great. None of them struggle to grasp the lesson content. The students this year are great. None of them struggle to grasp the lesson content. The students this year are great. None of them struggle to grasp the lesson content. Ow. This phrase was, the students this year are great. None of them struggle to grasp the lesson content. Notice for our pronunciation, year and R almost become a long R sound. So instead of year are, yearer, yearer, the students this year are great. And none of them becomes none of them. So instead of it becomes more of an sound. None of them. And we have another new term here, struggle to grasp. To struggle to grasp something, grasp is usually meaning to hold on to something, to grab something. But here, grasp is used to mean to understand. So none of the students struggle to understand the lesson. We have this term, to struggle to grasp something, to have trouble understanding. Now our opposite term is to have a firm grasp of something. That means to understand it well. That's it for this phrase. Well, let's move on to the next one. I'm really not ready for today's presentation. Fingers crossed it goes well. I'm really not ready for today's presentation. Fingers crossed it goes well. I'm really not ready for today's presentation. Fingers crossed it goes well. This phrase was, I'm really not ready for today's presentation. Fingers crossed it goes well. Now at the beginning here we say not ready becomes not ready. So again, that TD sound softens like it does in many other situations we've explored in earlier videos. And here in our second sentence, fingers crossed it, the crossed it becomes crossed it again with that softening. So fingers crossed it goes well. Now, we have another new phrase here, fingers crossed. What does that mean? Well, to cross your fingers in America, to cross your fingers like this is a sign of good luck. So if you do this, you're wishing for good luck, you're wishing something goes well. Many times we'll just say, oh, fingers crossed, if we're hoping something will end up well. That's it for this phrase. Well, let's move on to the next one. I wasn't sure about hiring Bill. His performance was really touch and go for a while. I wasn't sure about hiring Bill. His performance was really touch and go for a while. I wasn't sure about hiring Bill. His performance was really touch and go for a while. This phrase was, I wasn't sure about hiring Bill. His performance was really touch and go for a while. Now here, at the beginning of our first sentence, I wasn't sure about becomes I wasn't sure. So again, that T we almost lose in wasn't. I wasn't sure about. So wasn't sure about go together into almost one large word. And here we have a new phrase, touch and go. Now touch and go in regular pronunciation is touch and go. Again, that and gets reduced to just the n sound, like we've covered in previous videos. Now this phrase, touch and go, means something that's very inconsistent. It's unsure. Well, everybody, that's it for today's episode of Native Speed Listening. Thank you all for watching through to the end. Fingers crossed you had a wonderful time. Remember to check out our other videos in the playlist if you enjoyed this one. Also, while you're at it, make sure to like and subscribe because there'll be plenty more videos like this coming out. This has been John from Ali. I had a great time making this video, and I hope you had a great time watching it, and I will catch you next time!